Welcome back to Next Step Career Corner. Today's episode is all about leadership in action, what it really takes to guide people, navigate differences, and collaborate across opposing perspectives. I'm joined by Erika Ivanyi, a seasoned leader who's passionate about mentoring others and helping teams find their shared finish line. Together, we'll explore how great leaders bring out the best in others, build trust through collaboration, and create environments where people feel seen, supported, and empowered to grow. So let's dig in. Erika, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for asking me, Stephanie. It's great to be here.
This is going to be very exciting. So before we get into it, give us an idea of your background. Tell us about your career and what you're up to these days.
Okay, so I actually started my career about 35 years ago. So thank you for letting me walk through that and think about that over the past couple of weeks. I started in financial services in Budapest, Hungary, working for Citibank, and I pretty much stayed with financial institutions my entire career, working in operations, sales, and service, and ending my career with Capital Group as a senior vice president of operations and general manager.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't know you were overseas that long. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, in total 10 years, but it was great because it really provided me with some, good lessons on diversity from a cultural perspective as well.
Yeah. So you've led teams through many, many challenges and you've dealt with these perspectives from cultures, politics. I mean, we can talk about differences all day long. So how do you personally define leadership with all of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it really took me a while to understand what good leadership versus bad leadership is. And I'm not saying that, I was a good leader, but I did see a lot of different leadership styles. And in the end, I think the way I define it is if you could truly be your authentic self and be a good, authentic leader and allow others to bring themselves to work, that's really a great way to lead. It's also so important to provide clarity for people. What are we trying to achieve? How are we trying to achieve that together? Try to build trust and then guide people through that relationship to accomplish the best that we all could together.
Yeah, so communication. I hear a lot of communication and just taking the moment to be present and understanding where they're coming from, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So what experiences most shaped your leadership style? Do you have any examples?
Yeah, so I think my leadership style was shaped most when I was most underestimated. Or when I had to prove, when you have to prove that you belong at a table, and people, or maybe people in question, why is she at this table? And those experiences taught me to lead with confidence, preparation, and really be committed to myself, to use my voice in those situations, because I was invited to a table for a reason. I was invited into a room for a reason. And sometimes those reasons might be told to me up front, like, I need your subject matter expertise. I need you to present something. Sometimes it's just because you're the senior leader of that department and you need to be there. But from that perspective, those situations when I was invited into a new room where I was gonna, be the leader at the table, those were some of the most challenging in the beginning for me, especially.
Right, when you're expected to step up.
Right.
Huge. Do you remember any mentors that stood out in your time as you were growing? Were there lessons that guided you even today?
The very first manager I had, he was the chief operating officer in Citibank at Budapest, Hungary. His name was Kevin. He was an American. He spoke literally no Hungarian, and I was bilingual because of my parents. And he was just such a good mentor to me. I would say, I finished my work. Do you have something else for me? And he goes, yeah, that's good, Erika. So, always ask, be curious. Why don't you go around and just ask people what they're working on and see what you could do to help? And, from that perspective, he allowed me to have curiosity and really tap into other people's expertise and be able to celebrate them, but also learn from them. And that's something that I encouraged with all of my team as well. That it's important to listen, to be curious, and to contribute as much as possible and never rest on your laurels, right? It's like you're not a leader because you're there to be, I'm sorry to say this, 8 to 5. Sometimes you have to do long hours. Sometimes you have to work harder. Sometimes you're the ones that have to maybe come up with the ideas or help people shape and form their ideas. And so from that perspective, I feel like Kevin was a great mentor. I mean, I also learned from a very terrible leader I had. She was a micromanager, and she was probably one of the worst leaders I've ever had in my life. And she literally would not let you write a sentence without saying, well, let me read that. And you're like, oh my God, and literally no trust, no possibility to learn or expand your thinking. So I feel like, those polar opposites really helped me to understand what I want in a leader and what I wanted to be in a leader and what I didn't want in a leader.
I love that opposing perspectives, because we always think about good leaders or good influences that we've had, good mentors, and yet we learn just as much from a terrible manager, because we realize what stifles us or what we don't want to be as we grow in our career as well. So
I think we do it as parents, right? We do it as parents when we say, I'm never going to do that to my kids. And sometimes we do it, but at the same time, you're like, okay, those are things I don't want to do, right? I don't want to be overprotective, or I don't want to do this or that. So it's good to have those lessons on either opposite.
Yes, yeah. So if you are going through a hard time, what are the lessons you're learning? I would take that as a challenge, because at this point in the job market, we need our jobs. There might not be another job out there. Right. So can we turn it around and learn, even if we're not happy in a work situation?
Yeah, and it's hard, and that's when you really have to rely on your network to get you through.
Yes, very true. Very, very true. One of the hardest parts of leadership is collaborating with people who have different ideas or opposing views, right? We butt heads across the table. So how do you approach these moments? What's your advice?
Yeah, it's so funny, because I was thinking that I was taught not to really engage in conflict. And then I thought, okay, I think women in general are kind of taught at a young age, like, don't engage in conflict, and, just be seen and not heard in a way. So it's hard sometimes when people have opposing views, especially when you're a new leader or a new manager. You're like, how do I really negotiate this? Now I'm working with people that work for me or peers, and I really want to get the best results. So I start going back with what Kevin taught me, which is be curious, ask people questions, listen, figure out really why is there an opposing point of view. And I think sometimes there's a shared value, or there's a shared objective we're all trying to reach. And if you just listen, I think there's a real opportunity to learn from others how to do that, and then redirect towards our shared goals. Sorry.
There go the dogs. Mine's barking too. Sorry, listeners. It's the reality of working from home. They always bark when we're actually doing something important, but never when we're not on a meeting.
Nope, they were definitely not doing that watching the morning news today.
No, not at all. Not at all. But now that we're actually recording. Yes, and I agree, when you're that new person, it's even harder. I work for a small organization, and I do professional development courses and whatnot. I don't do the actual teaching, but I help facilitate that. And we had a new admin join, and it was interesting because she started asking hard questions. And at first you feel defensive. You're like, well, wait, this is how it goes, and this is what happens. But when you realize, oh, they're asking because A, they don't understand, or B, they're thinking from the customer point of view or the member point of view, or whatever point of view it is, they actually mean well. And when you realize you're on the same page when it comes to, hey, at the end of the day, we want to cross that finish line together, it takes the edge off.
Yeah, 100%. And I've been on that side of it too, where people are like, why are you questioning everything? Do you think it's broken? I'm like, no, I'm just trying to learn. So it's a good way to balance, not making questions feel like, you're insulting somebody. You're really just curious. And sometimes that curiosity makes people uncomfortable.
And the culture, right? Very direct could be okay in one regard, but then in other cultures, it could be very offensive. And so having to learn the cultures too, the languages and the body language, that can also be a big deal.
Yeah, and it could be cultures of new company. Even I remember when I joined Capital Group, the majority of the people that worked there had tenure of 20, 25, 30 years. And so I'm coming in and asking questions, and I remember like the first 3 or 4 months, people were just like thinking that I was asking these questions to say they weren't doing things correctly, where I was really truly just trying to learn. So I think it's how you question, and make sure maybe you listen more than anything else, and write things down. Maybe that question isn't that important down the road.
Yeah. I love writing things down. It always drives me nuts when I'm explaining something and they're not writing things down.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some practical ways leaders can create space for healthy debate while still moving forward with projects? I mean, we're talking about this right now, right? Like culture, conversation, attitude, your voice pitch. Right. What are some ways to move through that?
Yeah, and again, this is something that I learned, and it took some time, but set expectations early, right? So let people know that we need everyone's perspective to create the best possible outcome, especially the people who are quiet. So if you always notice the same people who are sitting at the table and not saying anything, sometimes those people have the absolute best ideas, but they're too quiet or shy, or not really self-assured enough to give an answer. And I think following up with those people on the back end, if they don't speak, is also really important. But one of my favorite quotes is, "A question well framed is a question half answered." So if we define the problem up front, and we define the objectives, and we tell people we want their point of view, but we box it into the time frame of this is how much dialogue we're allowing for this.
Yes.
Right. Then you encourage the open dialogue, but you also have to frame it up in a way that this isn't going to go on for the next 2 or 3 weeks, right? We need to work through these questions and see what we have. And then like, this is the brainstorming part of it. So, and it's okay if it happens later on too. You just have to remind people and bring them back to what the shared objective and value is. But that's happened so many times, right? I mean, especially in organizations that are highly collaborative, because they want more people at those tables, at those project meetings, at those sponsor calls. And so there's a lot of opinions sometimes, and some of it's good feedback and some of it's just, input, and you don't have to take all of it. You could just say thank you for your input.
Well, and this reminds me of a time I was a leader, and I remember on one of my performance evaluations, I got some feedback that I didn't listen to feedback. And I remember talking to my manager about it. I'm like, oh no, I listened, but ultimately my decision was this. So it's interesting to think about like explaining as well. Like, yes, I want your feedback. It's all very important. And then when you make that decision, okay, here's the decision, and maybe here's why. I mean, you don't want to go way too deep into it, but just enough where people who are giving their feedback and their input are still feeling valued. Right. It's just not the direction that we went in.
I agree 1,000%. Ultimately, you have to let them know they might not be the decision makers. It's not that their input's not valued, but ultimately there's going to be a decision made, and it might not be what they wanted. And I have so many examples of that.
We could be here for hours.
We could.
Right. Yeah, the more collaborative you are, the more opinions you're going to have. But at the end of the day, it usually comes to one person that makes the decision. And we have to balance those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So how do you balance finding that finish line with making sure everybody feels heard? Like we were just talking about that. What is your advice to make sure that everyone at the table is being heard, even if crossing the finish line means, hey, we went in a different direction?
Yeah. I am a self-proclaimed get her done kind of girl. I am, if I did a personality test, it would be a red torpedo. It's really hard for me to put on the brakes sometimes. So if, the finish line, we define it as a group, I'm going to like rush towards it. So it took me a lot of work to really make sure I built into the process to listen to the dialogue, make sure we checked all the boxes, build the process up front and build time. And so when we got to the finish line, we had people's perspectives and, we followed the process and we got the best outcome ever. And it can slow the process down, but ultimately it's going to help so we don't have to rework our decisions. And I remember when I worked at a very big bank, starts with a C, and it felt like things would just get done so fast, and they wouldn't listen to some of the subject matter experts in the room. That was like, but if we do this, we're going to be in trouble because this is what's going to happen to the customer, or this is what's going to happen to this process, or the technology wouldn't be able to handle it. So then we roll things out to the customers, and then ultimately we have to go back and rework it because we didn't listen to the subject matter experts. We didn't listen to the people who have the knowledge and the experiences and understand what the impacts might be to the employees, to the clients, or how much change management is truly involved in a process. So I know this is a really long way of answering it, but I totally believe that you have to identify what the finish line is and what the objective is, but then build time into your process to make sure the voices are heard and you don't have to do the rework because it's painful for every single stakeholder.
Every stakeholder. And so even having time after you finish the project or the deliverable is also good to see what the reactions were.
Yeah. Yeah, lessons learned is just part of your process. You have to build it in to go back to say what worked, what didn't work, what could we have done better, and celebrate the successes. So that's hugely important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about people management. What's been one of your biggest challenges as a people manager, and how did you navigate it?
Yeah, so I think we talked about me living in cultural differences there. So it was literally my first leadership role, and I'm sure everyone's had challenges throughout their career, but this one stood out so much to me. I'm living in Budapest. I was hired on after college. I had been working for a couple of years, and then they promoted me to an assistant manager, and it was a small team I was responsible for. It was 7 people. But there was one gentleman there who thought he should have the job. And yeah, one of those situations where you're like, and he made it really clear to everybody he talked to that, he didn't think I was right for the job. And then he shut down and he really wasn't producing anymore. And I would ask my boss what to do. And he's like, well, you were hired for a reason, and he just needs to understand that. And I was like, that's not helpful.
No, not at all.
Not at all helpful. So anyway, my first approach was not a winning approach, which was you try to overcompensate. You're like, well, I'm going to show you why they hired me. I'm going to work twice as hard as you. I'm going to be here 14 hours a day. I'm going to do your job too. And I was like, what am I doing? This is stupid. I'm literally doing his job, and he's going home and having a nice dinner with his family every night, and I'm here till like midnight. So that was not the right approach. I do not recommend that for anybody. But what I did do, he was a smoker, as most people were in Eastern Europe when I got there. And I asked him one cold wintry day, I'm like, would you like to go for a walk with me on a smoke break? And he was like, oh, okay. And he did. And then I just asked him all about himself, and I asked him about his career, and I asked him really what his aspirations were. And I asked him straight out why he was so against me. And he said it's because I'm a woman, and he had not really ever anticipated working for a woman, especially one as young as me. I said, okay, but here I am. And so I'm not asking you to do anything but just your job, but can I also use your expertise from time to time? And so from that perspective, I started to build trust with him. I would ask him questions, and not like naive, like, oh, I don't know how to do this, but
right.
questions like, why do we do this? Can you explain that to me? Or how would you do this? And And once in a while, I would throw him a question that I thought I knew the answer, but I wanted to verify it. And I felt like that really helped. And eventually he became one of my biggest advocates.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's impressive.
Well, I don't know if it's impressive, but I'll tell you, it was painful first couple of months on that brand new leadership role.
Yeah. There were several roles I was interviewed and got the job, and I was an external client or candidate. And when I came, I started learning to ask if anybody had applied to the job because there was
Right.
always one. There was always one that applied to the job, and it was
Right.
very, very similar. They thought they should have gotten the job, and I get it. They have the internal knowledge that I didn't
Right.
have. I didn't have to deal with being a woman, but I did have to deal with the age because I was always
Right.
much younger. And that was, I wish I had the knowledge I knew now, then I would
Yeah.
have handled things differently back then. But that's powerful to just like, hey, let's go for a walk and talk and dude, what's your issue with me?
Well, I mean, I was just like, I don't know what else to do at this point. Just tell me I mean, he's like, well, you can't turn yourself into a man. Okay. You're right about that. But what I really learned was people really resist you personally.
Yeah.
What they resist is just the fear of loss, right? They lost out on something, or maybe they're going to lose something in the future because they don't understand your perspective or where you're coming from. So I really found like a direct conversation grounded in empathy was the only approach I could figure out. And I've used that since in my career for similar situations that you talked about, right? Coming in and there was an external person who, wasn't quite thrilled that I got it, but it happens, and it happens every time you get promoted or come into a role because there's always going to be somebody that thinks it should have been me.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult.
Right.
I don't think there's one right way to handle it. It all depends on the
Right.
personality and their background and culture and
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah. Okay, so then let's talk about the team. How do you motivate a team when morale is low or when
Mhm.
goals feel out of reach?
Well, I think I talked about it before about, there's process you put in place. But something I always built into a process is looking for the small wins along the way,
There you go.
celebrating the small wins along the way. It's like, okay, so, we're 2 weeks into a 16-week project and we already think we're falling behind, but look, we started building this out and this worked. So I think that helps to motivate people and always reconnecting people to the purpose. What are we trying to accomplish? And then what did we do this week to accomplish that, or today, or so I think that is it. And I mean, I've seen some teams at their lowest during COVID when we were trying to
Mm,
figure out what's our work from home strategy going to be, and how do we get people back into the building again who really didn't want to come back to the building again, right? So, and that's what you do is you just, have conversations, talk about the goals, and then, celebrate the small wins. And I think that's it.
yeah. Well, I'm thinking of COVID. I do find it very ironic that when COVID happened and everyone got sent home, there was this huge push for connection, right? Because we were worried about being
Yeah.
isolated and alone.
Yeah.
And then we got used to working from home, and then when everybody went back into the office, I mean, it's now 2025, end of 2025, and we're still working to get people back into the office. So I do find a little amusement that we went to the panic of, oh my gosh, isolation, all the way to, okay, now come back, let's collaborate together in person.
And that's the hardest part, right? Because people get used to it and they're like,
Hmm.
why would I need to come back, right? And that was the hardest thing from an employee perspective. And then they would work even harder because they're trying to, show that they could be productive. And it almost feels like, it was hard to explain to people, we totally trust you, but it's about culture. And yeah, that's a hard
Yeah,
sell. I have to tell you,
it's a hard
working
sell.
a hybrid model now, where when I left, that was the model that was put in place ultimately, and it's still challenging because people still want that. So
Well, and I think people need flexibility in the long
one
run. Like, oh,
hundred
I need to go
percent,
home early to pick up my kids, or I have a doctor's appointment, or I have, because when you're working remote, no one can really tell, right? Because you're
right,
not physically gone. Like, they can't see that you're physically gone.
right,
But as a mom with, I have a middle schooler now, that is the hugest thing about me working from home is I'm the one that can drop everything and go
Right.
outside of my clients, their schedule. But yeah, it's organizations just I don't think it has to be all remote or all hybrid or all in person. It just needs listen to your
Be
people, be
flexible.
flexible,
Right.
be flexible, trust them, outline this is the finish line, this is what I need because
Right.
my colleague at this association I work with, he can do things in 5 minutes that takes me an hour. Still paid the
That's
same.
just it. I mean, but
Right.
that's 1,000% correct, right? So
Right.
people are different,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't treat everybody the same.
No, no,
But
not
we
at
try
all.
to create this cookie cutter model and force people into it rather than trust. I would say trust but verify. I'm like, okay,
Right. Yeah.
trust, but okay, let's talk about that project you're working on, right?
Right. Just keep the communication going. Right.
It's
That's
just
the important thing.
implementing different tools that
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have to have in your toolbox because you could see Sally walking down the hallway and would be like, hey, you have a minute? Let's talk about this. It's just different. Sorry, we went way off track, but I liked it.
We did, but that's fine. This is I mean, COVID, right? COVID was such a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's go back to team and collaboration. So how do you foster collaboration among teams that might be siloed or have competing priorities?
Whew, yeah, that's hard because I have sponsored many projects, many very expensive projects where you have the IT people and the operations people and the HR people, and you're responsible for getting a result, and everybody thinks that their piece of the puzzle is more important. And I think it does just go back to making sure that you are connecting them to, I keep saying it over and over again, but what are the shared outcomes we're trying to accomplish? And what are our shared values as an organization that are going to help us accomplish those? And make sure that success is interconnected, right? So we couldn't do this without the IT group, right? And we certainly couldn't do it without HR helping us to recruit new people. So I think it's just making sure people understand that everybody's value is very important. And Gertrude thinks so as well. She thought that was just fascinating. Sorry.
Oh, I love it. So, thinking about the next generation of leaders, what advice would you give for them?
It's funny. This one, I'm going to say I cheated a little bit. I asked around for this one because I have been working more on nonprofits for the past 4 years since I retired. So I'm in a position where I work with people that don't work for me. We work together. Right. And I've asked my daughter and my son who are in their 30s in the workforce and some friends who are still working at my old company, what they're looking for. And I thought it would be so different because of AI and everything else. And it's pretty much the same. You're looking for people who can adapt, who can be flexible, who have good critical thinking skills, good collaboration skills, who are willing to listen. And who are curious, who are going to go out and be like, what is the new and the different that could actually help the organization, help me personally, help my peers or my staff to be better. And I think that hasn't changed. In 4 years, I thought, wow, it's probably really changed because of all this new technology. I think the technology is just literally that. It's a tool that can help you do your work more efficiently in some ways, but the people aspect of it doesn't change, right? You have to be able to adapt, learn, and support one another.
It's very true. It's very true. It's just people skills. It comes down to people skills and
It
relationships.
really does. I mean, and even more so because it's going to be more challenging, I think, for the type of people skills or the type of work that people will do in the future. And it'll be interesting to see how people adapt to that. So,
yeah, I want to talk about AI, but we're at the end of our time, and so I won't go down that rabbit hole. But what I will say is, you still need people driving the project, driving the interactions. There are so many things that technology can help with, maybe hinder, but in the end, we still need people. We still have relationships.
Absolutely, that doesn't
Right.
change.
So What does leading through differences mean to you? Can you give that to me in a sentence or a little sound bite?
What does leading with differences mean to me? I'm sorry, my something popped up on
Yes,
my
yes.
screen.
What does leading through differences mean to you?
I mean, leading through differences is it's change management, right? It goes back to, in fact, one of the last things I did before I retired was I created a change management organization because the differences are greater than we think. I also sponsored our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, which created a roadmap for the future. How do we really get diversity, equity, inclusion more ingrained into our organization? So to me, it really is about using diversity as a strength and guiding people towards a shared purpose. So that's what it comes down to. And I still think diversity, equity, inclusion is critically important. And this time, more than ever, we don't want to be in an echo chamber. We need different voices at the table. We need people with different experiences, different upbringings, different schooling, and we don't want to cherish the same.
It's true. And I'm in full agreement. Where we're in a world where differences cause so many problems, they're actually bridges to better outcomes,
Right.
I believe.
Because you need to understand each other. But we're so focused on trying to make everybody understand our one perspective versus trying to listen and understand other people's perspectives. And so in work, that's going to be critical. And that doesn't change, right? And that's why things like change management are so critical in diversity, equity, inclusion programs. I totally support those.
Right, right. And especially when technology is making our world very, very small.
Right.
The culture is big. We could have a whole nother podcast episode about DEI.
Yeah, we could.
Maybe that will be coming soon. Well, Erika, thank you so much for your time today. I know this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to your experience and what we could learn from you. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you. Thanks, Stephanie.
What an inspiring conversation with Erika Ivanyi. Her insights remind us that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about listening, learning, and helping others rise alongside you. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share Next Step Career Corner with a friend or colleague who could use a little leadership inspiration. Until next time, keep taking your next step with courage and clarity. Have a great